My name is Patty Bernard, and I am a member of the Nevada Women's History Project. Today is September 6th, 2018. We are speaking with artist and historian Marilyn Royle Melton, and we are so fortunate to have you come and talk with us today. This interview is thanks to the generosity of the Roxie and Azad Joseph Foundation. Marilyn, can you talk a little bit about your formative years, where you grew up, your parents and family, and your schooling?
Well, I am so lucky to be, my whole life has just been pure wonderful luck. And I think lucky of being born in Nevada. My dad was working in Carson City when I was born. They already had two darling children. Uh, they had the wonderful first one, my sister, and then they had the boy, and then I came along. But they had to come from Carson City to Reno to get a baby because they had no hospitals or doctors or whatever in Carson City. So I was born in St. Mary's Hospital, and my mother, in those days, they had to stay in the hospital for 5 days. Well, she got out of there a little early, but my great aunt lived a block away from the hospital, so we were we were part of the community in Reno already. But they, when I was probably about not even two, I would guess, the Depression came along. I was born in 1933, December of 1933, and my dad did lose his job in Carson. So they came to Reno and lived on Bell Street, right by the river, uh, right across the street from the river. And my dad went down he got a job with soil conservation, but that was temporary, but it was a job that got him through that part of the Depression. And so I remember as I grew, lived there till I was 5 years old, started school at McKinley Park School, and which was right down the street. And I remember my dad getting up and going down across the street and fishing in the Truckee River when I was with my dad, of course, and I was his pal. And so that's how my first memories of Reno. And then when I was 5 years old, they bought a house on 6th Street in Reno. And it was my neighborhood until I got married. And it was when I was there, I went to Mary S. Stoughton, Northside Junior High, and Reno High School, and they were all very close. I did have to ride my bike to Northside, but the friends that I made in grade school, in kindergarten, are still my friends, and were my best friends throughout my life, some of them. And I still have a group from Reno High School that gets together monthly for lunch, and once a year we have another reunion. So it's been a tight community of good friends. When I was but I was lucky in a way. I'm not sure whether everything I do, I account for luck. But when I was little, I think my mother was the epitome of the mother, of the wife. We had the cleanest house in town. She had the cleanest children in town. And we ate well. She was always taking care of the house And so I was probably the little one who started out by going just my mother wouldn't let me cross the street, so I made friends with everybody on my block, including this wonderful older woman who was had been a school teacher. Her name was Gill, I'm going to say Margaret Gill, I think, but we called everybody Mrs. in those days, Mrs. Gill. And Mrs. Gill, she had to stay home with her daughter who had epilepsy, and so she could no longer teach. And so she loved little children, and so she brought all the little children to her house, and I was one of them, and that's where I first knew I was an artist, because she gave me the tools and the interest. She encouraged me, and I remember her saying to my parents, give her an easel, give her pastels. And my mother and dad would probably have never noticed that I was an artist. And so my first friends were the ones on my block. And then as I was also, my mother probably knew the neighborhood was safe. So I made friends with Catherine Ross. She lived on the corner of Maple and Nevada Street. And that's where I used to go up and we'd play in the ditch. And I don't know the name of the ditch. They all had names. And then my other friends, I would branch out and could visit the friends who went to school with me. And just the other day, I went to see a lady who lives in Carson City in a rest home, who went to school with me in kindergarten, first grade. And her sister is Cress, I can't think of her name right now. But anyway, we went over to, their father was in the Army, Maisie Harris, and it was her name, and Cress Harris. But anyway, I branched out. I could go to Whitaker Park and play in Whitaker Park, and my friends lived on Ralston Street and Wingfields, and so I could, but I didn't, and I've made friends. I would say my mentors and friends were all the people that lived in my neighborhood. And I, of course, we used to play out in the front at night, which was 6th Street, on our street until it got really dark. And we'd play One-A-Cat. And One-A-Cat is baseball, where everybody gets their ups, and then they'd move up from first base to second base, or third base to second, and we'd play all the, so that's what I call One-A-Cat. And then, but I was permanent fielder because I was youngest. So they'd all yell, Marilyn, go get the ball, go get the ball. And then when there was a car coming, they'd say, car, car. And we'd stand off on the sides of the street. But I loved school, and I loved my friends, and I loved my neighborhood, and feel that I was, and then I could walk across the street when I got to high school. The bell would be ringing as I would be walking across the street because it was so close.
And you went to the old Reno High School.
Old Reno High School, which later became junior high school, I believe. But it was the original only Reno High. And when I went to school, it was the only high school in Reno. And then they built the new one, and I was an officer on the student body, and I remember we went to see the new Reno High School that was being built on Booth Street, all the fancy new things that were going into that wonderful new school. And so I was last class, 1951, class out of Reno High School, in the old Reno High School.
And then you went on to?
And then went on to the University of Nevada. And I wanted to be an art major. My mother, being old-fashioned, had said, you can't major in art. You can't take any art. She wouldn't let me take art in high school or in college because she said you can't make a living as, and so you had to be either a secretary or a teacher or a nurse. And none of those appealed to me. Even an art teacher didn't even appeal to me. My mother, in her later years, said she was wrong, but it was the way things were. You had to have a encouragement to be able to support yourself. If you got married and your husband died, God forbid, you would have to support yourself. So that was the thinking, and so I did. My sister was already a senior in college, and she said, take all the, so I had to take English, the things that were, and I was not a good, I was playing. And I joined a lot of clubs and was in the sorority, and we won, actually, my sorority, we won everything because I was the artist. I was also loved to be in charge of things. And so we won the float, and we won.
What sorority were you?
I was a Tri-Delt. And the other day in my art class, this woman said she was a Tri-Delt, and it turned out there were 4 of us, and I started to sing the Tri-Delt song. So, you know, I was never, even though I was not a really great sorority person either, but it was a Tri-Delt dance that I asked this cute guy to go with me, not knowing he already had 2 or 3 other girlfriends on the string. But he went with me, and we got married while we were still in school, and I quit school. And it didn't really ever bother me that I had quit school, because I always thought, I know I'll be successful, it doesn't really matter. And that's pretty crazy on my part, but that was the way I felt.
And this young man was?
Roland Melton. And at the time, this young man, I think one of my strongest attractions to him was most of the other young men that I knew in school were boys. And Roland had had a very tough life. His parents had been divorced when he was 2 or 3 years old. He had been moved back and forth between grandparents, and his mother married 3 times, his father married 3 times. He never had any semblance of a stable home life. His mother was a waitress in Fallon, and he was told that he had to go live with his mother. And he started high school in Fallon, and then she left. And he was by himself in Fallon. But, here he was, he had already dropped out of school for a year, so he was a year older than the other kids. And so when he started high school, and he was living by himself, and most of the teachers didn't even know it, but he was adopted by the city of Fallon. And most people will assume that he was born in Fallon or raised in Fallon. He only lived there 3 or 4 years, but it was the community that took care of him. And he was a hard worker, and Claude Smith came to the school, and Claude had the Fallon Standard, and he said, I need a young man. Do you have any people in your class, to Ann Gibbs Berlin, if you have anybody in your class that would be good to, sweep the floor and take care of take messages and be kind of a jack of all trades over at the newspaper building. And Ann said, got Rollin to get the job. You see how lucky we are. He became a newspaper man when he went to the Fallon Standard. He found out about writing, and Anne Berlin was a marvelous person. I'm sure you will run across her in all of your interviews. But then these teachers of his submitted his name to get a Herald's Club scholarship, which was $1,000 a year for every high school in the state of Nevada at the time. And so the Herald's Club scholarships were the beginnings for young people who did not have the ability financially to go to school. And $1,000 paid for a school in those days in a year. So he graduated in 1950, and so we met. I actually invited him to go to a shipwreck dance, and the shipwreck dance was when the dance was taking part when the ship went down. You're under the water, and what were you doing when the ship went down? And so Rollin and I were bartenders when we went to the dance, and it was a year and a half later we were married. I think we were married March the 25th, 1953. So it was 2 years after I'd graduated from high school. And we had our first child June 29th, 1954. So that was more than a year later. But we did elope because my parents were pretty sure that I should not get married. In fact, we were sitting in the living room, and I had his Theta Chi pin on, and my mother said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "Well, it means we're engaged to be engaged." And she said, "You give that back to him right now." I guess I didn't follow the right trap. That my parents knew better what I should do than I did, but I did it my way.
So you were a homemaker then?
We lived in what was called then Victory Heights. They were put up. The new library sits on the area where Victory Heights was, but they were barracks that were put there after World War II. And when all these young men were coming from after the war was over, and they had the GI Bill, and all the colleges and universities were being flooded with these young men who had government money to go to school. So, and most of them were married. Now, there was a gentleman on Forrest Lovelock who was in the legislature, and he just hated Victory Heights because it encouraged kids to get married and have babies when they should be in school. So, and he wanted them torn down. So they were torn down. We fortunately got in there under the wire. Roland graduated in June of 1955, and they were torn down right after that. So they probably had a lifetime Victory Heights, and there were, I'm going to say 8 buildings. And so many people that I know, and you probably know, who started their families and lived, and a lot of them were not the returning veterans. And one of my greatest mentors was a professor who lived in Victory Heights right across the street from us by the name of Wilbur Shepperson, who I dearly loved and was one of my great mentors. Let's see, so Roland finished school. He was, when he graduated, he went in the Army because the ROTC people, so we got in the car and we drove with little Royal in the back seat, no seat belts, no car seats, no nothing. This kid in the back seat, and we went to Georgia, Fort Benning, Georgia. And then after BIOC, Basic Infantry Officers Corps training, we went to Fort Riley, Kansas, and our second child was born in, Wayne was born in Kansas. I always told him, just watch The Wizard of Oz, you'll see Kansas, it's black and white. And then you go across the border and it's color. But anyway, that was the way I teased my children. And then I had Kevin in 1959, and it was just only a year later I had our fourth son, Jamie. And Jamie died, which when you have down here what transformative experience, I had never had anything in my life till I lost my first baby, or my little boy. Okay, anyway, so that, when you have been treated wonderfully by your parents and your everything, so the first time you have to deal with loss has probably a transformation on your life, but you do find out you can live through anything. And you probably, I'm not sure, but they say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I guess there's truth to that, but you do learn more about yourself from the experiences that are, you find the spine that you have and the health and the strength that you have. Actually, I guess I have kind of gotten to my life with Roland and what brought me, and actually once you get married, your life is joined with someone else's. But Roland, when he was going to get out of the Army in 1957, he had been in for 2 years. He had an offer of a job in Nebraska, but a friend of his, former classmate, when he was in journalism here at UNR, called him and said, the sports editor job is open at the Gazette. If you get right on it, maybe you can get it, which he did. He got the job, and we came back to Reno, and we bought a little house on Yory Avenue. I did start my third year of college while we were living in Victory Heights, and when Royal was a baby. And Roland and I tried to keep me in school by his staying home with Royal while I was, when I went to class. And so we kind of worked it out. So I almost got my third year in. But the actually my sophomore year, for some wonderful reason, I got the job of being the art editor of the Artemisia, which was the yearbook for the university, and it was the 1954 yearbook. And that yearbook, every page has my artwork on it, and I learned a lot. You know, not from a class, but how to work with a printer, and and laying out pages. And because I laid them out, I did all this artwork for the whole yearbook. And the fun thing about the yearbook was that my child Royal came on the 29th of June 1954, and Roland walked in with the yearbook, has just come off the press at the same time. So my yearbook and my son came the same day, and that was the wonderful experience. So after that, well, I like to do invitations and stories, and so the next child that was born, I made the birth announcement, and it was a drawing of Roland carrying the baby. And then so then it took a while, but by the time we had Kevin, I thought, well, everybody needs to have a picture of my three beautiful boys. So I designed a Christmas card, and had the boys pictures were in ornaments. And so that was my very first Christmas card, which I have done now for, let's see, Kevin is 59. He's going to be 6. So it's been 60 years that I've done Christmas cards. So it all came from learning to work with the printer. And Roland had a friend who was the printer. He had run the Fallon Standard. He was the son-in-law of Claude Smith, who had started Roland in the business of the newspaper business. So Ken Ingram had this little print shop. I thought that all these people hated me every year when I came in with my Christmas card. Here's the artwork. And for a long time it was always black and white, because it took me a while before in order to do color, they had to have, I had to do each color separately on see-through sheets. And then after a while they learned the printing business, and I learned how to do it, but then with color. But I had to get the cards ready by the 1st of November, because they had to send to Sacramento to get separations. It was wonderful to do all these things, but I had to learn with the printers, and they didn't like me because this was a small job. When I started doing my cards, I sent 100 cards or 60 cards, and it's a small job. Well, it had grown up to 500 or 600 by the time a few years later. And I'm not sure how many I send out now. I know it's at least 300 or 400. And I always accuse people of saying, you know, once you get on my Christmas card list, you can't get off unless you die. So I that's one of the, and I used to frame them and have them on a wall in our house. But now, after all these years, I have, 60 years, 60 cards. It's been a long time since I've framed one. I've framed a few of the art works that I've done because I think they're kind of fun. And I have always had three or four things about my card. It always had to have a good, deep message. It also had to have something about the family, and it had something current, but I never was cutesy or funsy about it. It had to be, it was my gift to my friends in art. So, so my second year of college was not a lost cause. And then as we bought our first little house, and it was a tiny little house on Yory Avenue, and made the kids. It was a fairly new neighborhood, and so there were a lot of little children, and all the little children played together, and it was great fun. But and I think we lived there 10 years. And I always said we were on the 10-year plan. So we went from Yory to California Avenue, and then we went to what I later called the Big House on Mount Rose Street. And that was one of my all-time great fun things. Every house I had, I always said I will leave it in more beautiful than it was when I got it. And I think being a visual person, being an artist, being trying to make things. When when the kids were really little, I made all my own clothes, and I designed most of them. And when I was real, most of them, 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 and When I was real, most of them.
To set goals, not too high.
When I was real, most of them. And
I'd have would be to set goals, not too high.
when I was real, most of them. And
I'd have would be to set goals, not too high.
when I was real, most of them. And
I'd have would be to set goals, not too high.
when I was real, most of them. And
I'd to set goals, not too high.
when I was real, most of them. And
I'd have would be to set goals,
Not too high. Really made me do some thinking. But yeah, I appreciate this.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you came and that you shared those with us. And I think that our vision of having these series of interviews with women of all sorts, ethnic, economic, um, because Nevada is so varied
It is.
in the people that come to Nevada. And it's kind of funny from the fact that you come from the East San Francisco, where many of the folks came from the South, from Las Vegas, down from that way, and from the South. For example, Bertha and Lucille, you know, came that way, and yet you
Came from the other direction.
from San Francisco. So let me ask you, because we are looking, Lucille, no, this is the interviews with women of all sorts, ethnic, economic, because Nevada is so varied
It is.
in the people that come to Nevada. And it's kind of funny from the fact that you come from the East San Francisco, where many of the folks came from the South, from Las Vegas, down from that way, and from the South. For example, Bertha and Lucille, you know, came that way, and yet you
Came from the other direction.
from San Francisco. So let me ask you, because we are looking, Lucille, no, this is the interviews with women of all sorts, ethnic, economic, because Nevada is so varied
It is.
in the people that come to Nevada. And it's kind of funny from the fact that you come from the East San Francisco, where many of the folks came from the South, from Las Vegas, down from that way, and from the South. For example, Bertha and Lucille, you know, came that way, and yet you
Came from the other direction.
from San Francisco. So let me ask you, because we are looking, Lucille, no, this is the interviews with women of all sorts, ethnic, economic, because Nevada is so varied
It is.
in the people that come to Nevada. And it's kind of funny from the fact that you come from the East San Francisco, where many of the folks came from the South, from Las Vegas, down from that way, and from the South. For example, Bertha and Lucille, you know, came that way, and yet you
Came from the other direction.
from San Francisco. So let me ask you, because we are looking, Lucille, no, this is the interviews with women of all sorts, ethnic, economic, because Nevada is so varied
It is.
in the people that come to Nevada. And it's kind of funny from the fact that you come from the East San Francisco, where many of the folks came from the South, from Las Vegas, down from that way, and from the South. For example, Bertha and Lucille, you know, came that way, and yet you
Came from the other direction.
from San Francisco. So let me ask you, because we are looking, Lucille, no, this is the interviews with women of all sorts, ethnic, economic, because Nevada is so varied.
It is.
In the people that come to Nevada. And it's kind of funny from the fact that you come from the East San Francisco, where many of the folks came from the South, from Las Vegas down from that way, and from the South. For example, Bertha and Lucille, came that way, and yet you
came from the other direction.
From San Francisco. So let me ask you, because we are looking, Lucille, this is the interviews with women of all sorts, ethnic, economic, because Nevada is so varied.
It is.
In the people that from Las Vegas came that way, and yet you came from Lucille, all sorts. Nevada is so varied.
It is.
In the people that from Las Vegas came that way, and yet you came from Lucille, all sorts. Nevada is so varied.
It is.
In the came that way. Lucille, came that way. Came that way. Came that way. Came that way.
I just wanted to say one thing about being on the Humanities Committee. Most people get 2-3 year, and so I was a governor's appointee. And most people have to get off the committee after 6 years. And Wilbur Shepperson, who was the heart and soul of the Humanities Committee, he made sure that every governor appointed me. So that's why I was on there for so many years. I must say, anything I've done, I have gotten more from the experience of being on that board than I gave. I loved being on the Humanities Committee and the good things we did. We were giving away government money and starting a lot of things for the whole state.
What motivates you and keeps you going?
I just think the joy of living, the joy of people, and I am constantly inspired and motivated by people who just keep plodding along and or come through difficult experiences. And when I told you the people who were my role models, this Mrs. Gill that lived across the alley from me, and Mrs. Ross, who got Ruth Hiltz to be my Girl Scout leader. And when I went into Ruth Hiltz's house, and she had a little baby, and she had painted little Dutch girls on the cabinets in her kitchen, and I couldn't hardly wait to be but Ruth Hiltz. And so I have several of Ruth Hiltz's paintings. And the last painting I bought from her, I went over and I said, you know, I need one more. It's got to balance out on my wall. And she said, well, you can have any of them but that one. And guess which one I walked out with? That one, the one she didn't want. She wanted to keep for herself. She's an amazing, amazing artist. She inspired me, and then I later, when I was in Victory Heights, I painted clowns on the bathroom, in the bathroom, because Ruth could do that. I've got a saying, or it's not my saying, but I've made sure I had it put on a mirror in my bathroom. Art is life, and life is art. There is no part of my life that isn't about art. It's about, I've collected great art. I live with it. My best friends are artists. Every piece of art in my house is part of that friend. I'm very close friends with all the people whose art I have. George Carlson, Len Schmiel. The only one, I guess, is probably one of the most expensive pieces of art in my house, but Wolf Kahn. I don't know him very well, but he's probably one of the best pieces of art. But Gus Bundy was a dear friend, and his daughters are good friends of mine, but he was in my portrait group. This portrait group was started by Marge Means in the 50s, and it's still going to this day. And I got involved with in like 1975. So, this is the group I go to every Wednesday, and we hire a model, and so I'm continuing in that group. So this was yesterday's painting. Yesterday was Wednesday. At 9 o'clock, I am at Nevada Fine Arts, and this young lady I've never met her before in my life, but she came and she enjoyed sitting for us and took pictures of all our paintings. I will probably, and Joan Shonard is in that group, and Joan is 94 or 5, and Joan never misses. She's one of the only people that I know that has, I'm sure she was there before I started in 1975. And it's been times of my life that I couldn't I had other things going in my life, but it's always been there for me. I can always go there and find my friends painting.
Yeah.
I did a portrait of Wilbur Shepperson, and it hangs, let's see, it hangs in the Nevada Humanities office.
I've seen that.
And Proctor Hugg's painting is in the courthouse, the federal courthouse. I love to read. I like to go back and dip constantly into the classics, and yet or read what's hot and new. I think you learn something from every book you read. It becomes part of your story to find somebody else's story. And I think if I have to tell you, I'm so proud of my daughter, but my daughter is not at all like me. But her focus is helping the poor and the underserved. Every job she's ever had, she's a fundraiser. Her current fundraising is for the Community Health Alliance. So this year I painted 11 paintings. In fact, I painted 11 watercolors, and I donated them to the Community Health Alliance. And I had note cards made of them. And so all of the original paintings, any sales go to her group. So, but I think what I would tell anybody, not just young people, it isn't about me. It's about the good you can do for other people. And whatever my talent is or my ability, I had the ability to give some money to the university for the Knowledge Center or other things. I love giving away my own money. I love giving away my art and but it isn't because I do this, it's because I have the ability to do it. And I must thank my dear, blessed, long gone husband that he was a hard worker and had a good heart and was always helping other folks. I think he was my most blessed mentor. He led the way for me, and I hope to keep his good heart alive, and my daughter does, and in her way as well. If you wanted to know how I would like to be remembered, it isn't me that anybody should remember, it's what I leave behind. And I think that's why I'm so fortunate to be an artist. I leave some artwork behind, and I leave my family and people, my daughter, and my sons, who hopefully carry on my positive experiences and their father's positive experiences and build on them. So don't remember me, remember what I did. I had some good kids, I did some good paintings, and I hope that someday they will be hanging in somebody's home and somebody will enjoy them.
Thank you very much for interviewing with us. It's been a real pleasure.